I'm Justin Snyder.
And I'm Stephanie Greenwood-Snyder.
We're just an average, everyday couple.
But over the years, we've seen the incredible importance of building community together.
We'll be talking with friends and experts about their stories and experiences to help us learn and grow.
We don't want to just survive through life.
We want to intentionally thrive.
This is The Intentional Thriver.
Welcome back to another episode of the Intentional Thriver podcast, the podcast where we look at how not to just survive in your life, but how to intentionally thrive. This is going to be episode 18 and our second 7x7.
Ooh.
And for those of you who don't know, or you missed it on the first one, what a 7x7 is, it's where we talk about the previous 7 episodes for 7 minutes each. And we really decided that we wanted to do that because, you know, there's a lot of information that kind of goes through, and we have so much fun getting to talk to our guests and people. And, you know, actually some stuff ends up having to get cut out from the podcast as well. So there's even some extra stuff that we can kind of talk about. And it's like, it's a little bit like the Oscars after someone gives an Oscar speech and then they get like an opportunity for a second speech off stage.
Except for we get the opportunity, not the one that won the Oscar.
That's true. We haven't won any Oscars.
Our guests were the true heroes.
That's true.
We just got to talk about them.
Yeah, exactly. We get to talk about how amazing they are. And
but how we implement them in our lives, implement their information in our lives, which is one of our goals for this podcast.
Absolutely.
The reason why we're doing this is for us and for our growth as people and parents and human beings, and hopefully.
And speaking of being human beings, I will say this last week has been it's been a tough week for the Snyder household. We've there's been a lot of sickness.
So much sickness
going around, and the kind of sickness that just like sticks.
Yeah.
The kids have gotten it. You got it really badly,
so bad.
And you're trying to shake it. So
bad.
I'm like teetering on the edge. I feel like I'm about to go, but
you're
like
not
fighting it off.
I have good vibes.
So if we say something super weird tonight, we're gonna oh there. Yes.
It's deep. It's gonna be fun. The next this 5 episodes I'm sick when we recorded them. So enjoy the next batch of episodes.
Which also reminds me, this being our second 7x7 means we are actually 2/3 of the way through season 1. Yes. Yeah. So what we're gonna do is that means, you know, after this episode, we have 7 more interviews and then another 7x7. So 8 more episodes. And then we're actually going to take a month break because we love doing these. We absolutely enjoy them, but it is a lot of work. It is a lot of time. And so, you know, we're going to take a little break and then we're going to hop into season 2. So we're already starting to get our guests lined up for season
probably
2.
Change things up a little bit. Do more ask for subscribe and like.
Stephanie is all about like, hitting that like and subscribe button.
You got to remind people so that they can like and subscribe.
Oh, boy.
And tell the algorithm that other people can see our videos.
Is there something subtle you're trying to say, Stephanie?
Like and subscribe.
Yes, if you wouldn't mind liking and subscribing on your platform of enjoyment or preference, whether you watch on YouTube or just listen through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, through the browser, whatever it is.
Thank you for those that have on Facebook, YouTube.
Or you can go crazy and like them all.
Them all.
Wow.
Make our day.
Jeez.
No, we are so thankful for just even my mom listening to it. So it's been a real pleasure to just have these guests on our show with us and just really enjoyed the last group of guests.
Yeah.
And they've been really different, huh?
Yeah, no, it's been great. It is a little crazy to think, because I mean it's like 7 weeks ago we had the last guest. Like it feels like a year ago.
Right.
You know, it feels so long ago. So going that far back is fun and cool. Really, and it's been nice to like follow up with people as well and see, you know, even from the time we have had them on the show, like what has changed in their life, which is actually a perfect segue into
our first
one that we're going to talk about. So
we will have them on again because they have done a lot of changes since this episode. So I'm going to start our timer.
Yeah, you want to kick us off?
That's okay.
Yeah, so this is going to be the Journey to Adoption. This was episode 11 with Danny and Emily Guynn. Stephanie, what did you think
Yeah.
about that episode?
Wow. I laughed. I cried. The whole spectrum.
Yeah, it was powerful.
For sure. It was
powerful.
very powerful. And the crazy thing to me is we walked some of that journey with them, and yet we still learned information that they either couldn't express in the time or couldn't even articulate themselves. And just to be able to circle back with them and hear their God stories and just their trials through that season. I mean, COVID was not a fun time to adopt children, but if it can encourage anyone, one person out there who's going into adoption and even foster to adopt, which is amazing, that they could do it during COVID, you can do it now, you know? And so I think something that really, there were two things that really like got me, and even re-listening to it was like, oh, wow. One of them was that I think a lot of people think that the adoptive parents are the heroes and they're the rescuers and they are coming to save the day. And from the child's perspective, especially an older child, especially someone who's gone through the trauma of the foster system, even the best case scenario, a foster system is going to have trauma and is going to have some really hard times in it. And that's the best case scenario. These kids that Danny and Emily lovingly took into their homes and into their lives and, you know, just love so dearly, have gone through some of the most unimaginable things, you know, literally being returned. I mean, heart-wrenching. And Danny and Emily literally being face to face with the reality that they are the villain of these kids' stories for a season.
Yeah, and I think Danny said it very well. It's you create a new wound unintentionally by, like you said, trying to do the right thing. And that was very eye-opening. Again, like you were saying, you know, it's and Emily said this as well, like some people can view or go into adoption with a superhero complex of like, I am gonna rescue this child, and they are. I'm not decrying that fact that like they are lovingly bringing them in from so much hardship and other traumas and things like that, but there is a very difficult transition that's involved in that for the child and for the parents as well. And so, you know, again, every situation is different. Every child is different, but you know, and I think it was very interesting. One thing that really stood out to me was, you know, they were talking about what they were going through. And this is, you know, when we were in their like community and things like that. And as much as we love them and appreciate them and, you know, in so many ways tried to and did walk alongside them in their life, like until you've been through that, you don't fully understand the extent of that. And you can try to be there for someone and love them and do the best you can on that front. But it is also very important. And they said this about like, you do have to find your support system, and specifically with an adoption, like finding a good adoption group for people who specifically. But
I think that's in any stage. Like 100%. Your parents needed to find a special needs group that understood what it was like to have an older special needs child. Other people need to find divorce groups or singles groups, or, you know, for us, young couples, you know, young children's groups. That sounds weird. Young couples with children. I don't feel couples very young right now. Children. There we go. That's the word.
Woo, we got there.
I know.
Like I said, it's been a week.
It's been a week. There's been times where we just looked at each other and said, this is surviving. It's okay. We're creating a podcast called Intentional Thriver because that's the goal. But anyway, the other thing I wanted to say was how real is it that your own kids can trigger your trauma? I thought that was and next level what Danny and Emily were explaining. But even our kids, even our beautiful 3-year-old can trigger trauma.
Oh boy, can she!
And I think that was just a really good way to put it. and how important Emily, I just loved that she made the importance of having to deal with her own trauma, deal with her own triggers, deal with her own baggage for the good of her kids, and how important that was to her. And she started maybe later in the process than she maybe wanted to, but I think that's just a good reminder to us all that we're not gonna like fix our own triggers, and our kids are definitely not. And so find the help, find the community, find the counselors, the therapists to help you heal those triggers.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
those were some really powerful things they told us. And I think that whole story of how their childhoods like got them prepared for this life,
Mhm.
and they have some exciting adventures ahead of
They
them.
do, yeah. No, that's a really good point about like your past, because I mean they both had, if you listen to the episode, they both have some very interesting past. I mean, some really hard parts of their past. But the cool part is, like, even with those really hard, from an outside perspective, like terrible, negative things that have happened to them that they've experienced, whatever it may be, really actually put them in a position where they could love on and have an experience, have the experience and have come from a position where they can actually like be more equipped to be able to help their kids and help each other. And and I think that's just a cool part about life when you are able to embrace that fact. And we'll talk more about this when we talk about Hansoo and Sarah's story, and because I think they exemplified that beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's
Yeah,
not over yet for
ongoing. Yeah.
them by any means, but yeah, I think that was a cool part, is like the value and the importance of your story
Mm-hmm.
and what that does. Ooh,
Okay.
that's a very soothing timer
I
this
know.
time.
Are you ready to go to bed?
Yeah, I think we're gonna fall asleep after that one.
Okay.
All right. Okay, episode 12, The Fear of Failure with Ethan
Ooh.
Sansoni. Yeah. This one hit home for me for sure.
Same.
Yeah, a lot of times, we choose our topics or our episodes based on things that we ourselves are interested in and want to talk about, or
Absolutely.
things like that. And for me, this was one that was really good to think through and process. And I don't think I am the only one who struggles with fear of
What?
failure,
No,
but I
just
might be.
you
I don't
and
know.
me.
Just
That's it.
just us, right? But yeah, I mean, it was an interesting conversation because different people are going to have different perspectives on that. And what I really appreciated about that conversation was like, and we kind of talked about this with Sai, and was that episode 4, something like that?
Wow, way back then.
Yeah, way back then. About taking risks,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean also taking calculated risks. Like as your responsibility grows,
Yeah.
like you do have to be what I would say like a wise steward of what you have been given. So I mean, as you are taking risks, as you are, taking challenges and things like that, like you do have to weigh what the consequence is going to be. And again, this is my opinion, this is my experience, like the person who tries to build like a tower or some kind of structure, things like that, but they didn't, the expression that they use is count the cost. And so, they get halfway through this project and they don't have enough funds or material or manpower to be able to finish the project. And so they just kind of abandon it. And that becomes like a monument of like not planning well and things like that. And so,
yeah, but it must be weird to people who may look at us and think, oh, yeah, they quit their jobs, they moved, they bought a house, they, had kids and then changed industries. Like, they might look at us and say like, oh, they must not be fear of failures. They must not, they must be risk takers.
No.
What did someone call you? Entrepreneur,
A serial
serial entrepreneur,
entrepreneur.
because we've started multiple companies. And it's just like, that's so funny to me because
Yeah.
perspective can be very different from reality.
That's true.
First of all, I
That's
mean,
true.
let's face it, like social media isn't reality.
Mhm.
And then the other thing is nobody knows like the calculations, like you said, that we've gone through. I mean, the countless hours that we have gone over budgeting, the countless hours that we've gone over contracts for those businesses.
Or the years that it took in
Years.
transitioning here to Atlanta.
Right.
This was not a whim of a decision. I
Right.
mean, it took
Absolutely.
3 years.
Yeah, from when we decided we were going to move. And it really took like 8 years. 10 years we talked about in college.
Yeah.
So, and the thing is there are some benefits of just jumping into it. Like,
Mhm.
could we have done it in our early 20s
Yeah.
and maybe had less risk, had less stakes, we didn't have 2 kids, we didn't have the lifestyle we're now used to, things like
A
that.
lifestyle of luxury.
But those kind of things really played into our calculations.
Yeah.
And so
Well, and I think another factor within this is knowing that you kind of have to plan for the X factor. I mean, for
Mhm.
us, like, we're in a strike right now.
2 strikes.
2 strikes. 2 strikes.
3
The
strikes,
Writers
we're
Guild
out. No,
and the Screen Actors Guild.
it's
So, like,
crazy.
there's no way to predict that. There's no way to know for sure what that's going to look like. So you kind of have to plan ahead. And thankfully, we had planned ahead,
Mhm.
and so,
Yeah.
so yeah, again, like, I think there's always the importance though,
Yeah.
when talking about a fear of failure, to know that some of that fear is actually a little healthy. And because it shouldn't cripple you. That's the thing, is it
Right.
shouldn't cripple you. It should drive you to be a better planner. And again, you can't plan for every possible outcome. I mean,
Right.
in the gaming world, we call it analysis paralysis, where there's so many options, there's so many things that you could do that you don't end up doing anything at all.
Yeah.
And so again, I think a lot of people can be paralyzed by that,
Yeah.
and just end up doing nothing, and
Yeah.
it crippling them. So
Right.
again, I think there's a balance in that of weighing your consequences, thinking ahead, being strategic, planning, because I think then you have a better opportunity and a
Yeah.
better possibility for success. And to be honest, like, another thing that we didn't get to really talk about too much on the podcast, but I think something else that's very important is defining to you what success is. Like, we talked about failure, like, what does failure mean? Understanding the difference between being a failure and failing at something, yada, yada, all that big difference, which was really good. Glad Ethan talked about that. But another thing too is understanding, like, what is your definition of success? And based on your worldview, based on what you value, your priorities, that is going to look very different. Like, our definition of success might be a little wonky or weird comparison to,
Someone else's.
not to call him out, but like a Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, what their definition of success is might be a little different from what our level of success is.
When we get their success. Just kidding.
But I mean, again, I'm not putting them down by any means. I'm just saying that, it's a little different.
What your goals are.
Yeah, know what your goals are, know what you want to accomplish, and pursue that with, weighing your options. All right, that was
wow. Okay, well, that we didn't even get halfway through his, because he also talked about singleness and all that, which I thought was very important, and just such a good view of how sometimes it can feel like a failure being single, but that doesn't make you a failure at all. And you have to listen to the episode to hear about that.
Okay, moving on to episode 13, Hansoo and Sarah Kim. Really, really great conversation with them about a topic that I think a lot of people struggle with. Again, talking
I
about,
do.
yeah,
I mean, you just
absolutely.
look at them and you're like, how can you have brain surgery twice when all you do is give and love on other
Yeah,
people? And that's a hard pill to
it
swallow.
is. It is. And I mean, again, that question of like, man, why do
Yeah,
bad
bad things
things happen
happen
to
to
good people,
people.
or just why do bad things happen in general?
And man, didn't you appreciate how much they were processing with us, like
Yeah, like during that
alongside with
episode,
us?
that was
That
really
was
good.
so special. And just to see
Hmm.
them putting together like that journey and how raw it was. And I think that's something that's so important to watch, because sometimes you feel like you're so isolated. You feel
Mm.
like you're so, even, I know this is so stupid, but even being sick for like 3 weeks. I know I sound like a baby, but like it's been hard. And
Yeah,
sometimes you get mentally in a place where you're like, I don't know what it's like to be healthy. I don't know what it's like to be normal.
yeah,
I haven't been able to like take my kids to the playground because I'll cough everywhere,
yeah.
or like
Well, it's been
do.
pretty hot too.
It's been hot, but we could go to the playground. But like things that I normally can do, I can't right now, and that's been really hard. And so I can't imagine being in a season prolonged. I have a friend battling cancer right now.
Mm.
She's been for 6 months, younger than me. Like that's incredibly hard. And
Yeah.
so just kind of acknowledging that you have to process through that. And I love that they said like their first surgery was actually easier for them to process than their second surgery.
Hmm.
And I think that's another like misconception, is that like, oh, you've already done this once, like
Right.
no, like it gets harder, the longer your mental weight is run down, people kind of forget about you too. That's just reality. They've done their meal train, they've done their, loving on you, and sometimes people forget. And so I think that that's a really good reminder that they needed to reach out that second time and let people know and ask for help, which is hard to do.
It is. Well, Sarah said something. I mean, they both said it together. That was really cool. That I think really does speak to like when something bad and unexpected happens in your life, like why, and like it feels unfair, it feels pointless, all these things. But to me, one thing that was so cool
Mhm.
about that is like Hansoo was sharing the story about how, like, was it a month or so after that, one of her good friends was in
Yes,
the
went through
hospital,
that. Went through something like that.
went through or had a family member. And so, like, because Sarah had been on the receiving end of people like coming and sitting with her in the hospital when she was in that space, she
Mhm.
was like, wow, this is what that did for me. This is how it
Mhm.
refreshed me. Let me then take that experience and then pass that on to someone else and give
So
that to
cool.
someone else, and then like go and sit with them
Mhm.
and comfort them and love on them. And so again, like, whether that be an experience like you're currently walking through, like a situation completely out of the blue, completely out of control, that is just so unfair, that is so frustrating, that you're walking through now, or one that you've walked through in the past, or whatever it may be, like, and we say this coming from our own
Mhm.
frustrating situations that have happened to us in our background. And again,
Sure.
even if you like listen to episode 2 of our story, what we've really tried to do, and even what we're trying to do with the podcast, is like encourage and help people walk through their journey,
Mhm.
and look at and ask questions. Ask questions.
Mhm.
Questions are great things.
Huge.
Not only to ask other people, but to ask yourself as well. I think um as soon as someone says like stop asking questions, or questions are bad, like there's something off with
Mhm.
that. And again, there's an appropriate time to ask questions. Yes,
Sure.
absolutely. And people say there's no such thing as a stupid question. I would say that if it's a question that has already been answered multiple times and you just haven't been listening, then
Oh,
it
okay.
it
Got it.
falls under the potential of being
Yeah.
a
Something
less
else
smart. question.
Something else I really appreciated was them talking about the power of telling their story.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with asking people questions, asking them about their story when they're ready. Don't like just pry.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like encouraging people. Like someone actually did ask and maybe was out of their comfort zone to ask or wasn't in a good place, and it literally changed the way Hansoo was feeling. It changed his mental health. It changed his trajectory of like that season of his life. And so like if you feel like you can ask someone to tell your story, or after our miscarriage, our losing a child, someone asked me when they were going through that, and like that step, even though it kind of reopened that wound, it also helped me heal at a deeper level than I was able to during the actual hard season. And we'll talk about that trial of ours at another time. But I think that is just the power of your story and the power of sharing your story, and don't belittle your story, even if it's not, having cancer not cancer, but having brain surgery or something like that. Your story is powerful, and your story is something that people need to hear and want to hear, and it's helpful to share.
Yeah, that I would say that's a pretty consistent theme
Mm-hmm.
from episode to episode. And like within our questions, one of the first questions we always ask is like, tell us about yourself, tell us about your background, tell us, and people's level of detail vary on what they want to share within that. But I think that's always a really good starting point, is understanding a little bit more of who that person is and where they've come from, because I think that gives us a little bit clearer of a lens to look through and see why they make the choices that they do.
Yeah. Okay. And then I have to, because this was so powerful to me, what did Hansoo say when we asked, can you thrive when...
Well, that was a very genuine, authentic question of like we have just gone through a week of survival.
Yeah.
Because we've just been
I sent a picture to my family. This
rough.
Is what survival looks like. And I'm like, and my kids are all sick and snotty and all these things. But so can you thrive in a season of survival, Justin? And what did Hansoo say? It was so epic.
Hansoo say?
He said,
well, he said, first of all, it depends on how you define thriving, because there's oftentimes what people think of when they think of thriving. It's, I've got the house and the money
Jeff
and
Bezos.
Jeff Bezos. No, I'm sorry, Jeff, if you're listening to this podcast.
I'm sorry.
Luxury oftentimes is what we associate with thriving. And it's vacation. Like, it means so much more than that, especially like understanding what spiritually thriving is. And
the whole package.
And then he said, I think this was really good. It's like, yes, you can thrive in the hard seasons. In fact, you can thrive because of them. I thought that was powerful.
Great job, Hansoo.
I thought that was really powerful.
That was awesome. All right, gotta move on.
Yes.
Okay, Heart of Hospitality by Litia and Josh, my
the
dear
Joneses.
friends. And man, did they do a great job not only presenting their heart of hospitality, but what hospitality means to them and how others can have a heart of hospitality. And I had a couple of people reach out to me to say that they want to have a heart of hospitality, and that's something that they long for, and they felt like they had some really good practical tips from that episode.
They really did,
about how to do that. And I think that that's just important to know, that you don't have to start with a Thanksgiving dinner, inviting
hosting 50 people at your house,
or even the weird people, or
the weird people.
The funny thing is there's always weird people, but there's always weird people for the weird people. Like, we're the weird people. So
that's true. We are the weird people,
and God's given us weird people to love on us. So, just find someone who you want to connect with. Ask them out for coffee. The stakes are low. Ask them if they want to go somewhere. A third party. You don't even have to have them in your house, but I think that that's a great step as well to have them at your house for a nice cup of tea. Invest in a farmer's market tea bag and, invite them over to test it out or make a cheese board. Like, you don't have to go all out on hospitality for it to be something that you practice and start implementing in your life. And I thought that was such a good advice for anyone in their journey.
And what a connection. Litia brought up this, and I thought it was an excellent point. The connection between authentic community and genuine community and hospitality, and how closely those are intertwined. And I would say, even, we'll talk about this later, but even what the Worrells talked about with generosity, like I feel like all of those are just so combined. And I mean, we see this a lot within the podcast and everything like that. Even if the topics are very different, there's a lot of overlap in between a lot of these topics and a lot of the pieces. So specifically within hospitality and its connection to community, like I think part of it is having a realistic expectation that doesn't happen. Like, I had coffee with this one person one time and like, boom, now we're like the best of friends, and we share every secret, and you know what I mean? Like, maybe some people connect that fast. I am not one of those people by any means.
Yeah.
But I think that genuine community happens with consistency, with investment, within intentionality. In fact, one of the episodes we're going to be doing in the next
you're going to sneak
chunk. Yeah, I'll give you a little sneak
preview.
Peek.
I was going to do that too, so go ahead.
We're going to talk about friendships,
adult
friendships, and having adult friendships, and having realistic expectations of those, and what
expectations.
That's gonna be. We're excited about that one, but again, we don't want to.
But I'm the kind of person who I'm like, one coffee and I'm like, we're best friends. You're good. I mean, I remember thinking like the whole year before our wedding, every time I met someone, I'd be like, is she gonna be my bridesmaid? Is she, like, I go that deep into like, you're gonna be, and believe it or not,
that extrovert life.
Yeah, exactly. And that's as an extrovert. But even introverts have it's harder for them. So they go on one date. It sounds bad, but one female friendship date, and or male. Anyway, not a real date, a friend date. Yeah, and they're like spent, right? Because that's like all their energy is gone. So, I mean, it's not just an extrovert thing. I think it's just really easy to have unrealistic expectations of yourself and of others. And so defining that is very important for yourself and what you can actually put into a relationship and put into the hospitality, but also for the other person. So, and knowing that not every person's going to stick, So I think Josh mentioned that like, there are people that are always welcome back, but that might not be someone that they see, they see making a consistent effort.
Absolutely.
And that's okay.
Yeah. And I think there's a balance too because I think sometimes people can make a little bit of an excuse to not have friends or, whatever it may be, by like, well, I haven't really connected with anyone. It's like, okay, but have you put forth an effort? Have you consistently put forth an effort? Not just like, I tried it once and it didn't work out, whatever. Because again, it does take time. It takes time to build. And again, like, because of quote unquote fear of failure, throwing it back to Ethan for a second, I think that's a big deterrent sometimes from hospitality. Because again, what if they think I'm weird? What if it doesn't go well as defined in my mind and my expectation? Exactly. It didn't work out, but it you just have to have a realistic expectation of what you want out of that relationship, and go from there.
And what's the worst that's going to happen? Like, we're not in high school people anymore. Like, the whole, I know. At least we're not. Maybe you are, but it's like, what are the stakes really when it comes to having someone over? They'll see who you really are, like, so just kind of follow that thread and see, what are your true fears based in. And with our last couple seconds, I just want to talk about Josh's answer to how are you intentionally thriving. Everybody's has been so different, which has been so cool. But
it's
I
fun.
think he did a great job putting, stealing from Chick-fil-A, but the mission master and mate.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was really good. And a couple of people have mentioned knowing your goals and knowing what your mission is to align to thrive. And I think that's really good. And I think mission master and mate are give you so much comfort at the end of the day to, like you said, we're in a season. I don't even want to say we're past a season because I'm still sick, but of the survival.
And who knows when I'm going to get it.
And you're not going to get it. I don't want you to. You're not going to get it. Anyway, but at the end of the day, we can sleep and we can still thrive because our mission hasn't changed.
Nope.
Our mate hasn't changed.
Nope.
Nope. And, our master hasn't changed. So I thought that was really well put, Josh.
Well done, Josh.
Okay.
And Litia.
Yeah, and Litia, of course. Moving on to Aaron and Rose.
Episode 15.
Aren't they just a joy to watch together? Like I said on the podcast, the first time I met them, I'm like, this is unreal. Like the way that they interact together, the way they talk to each other is, and I think they summed it up so well. They try to outserve each other. They try to just love on each other, and it comes through in everything they do. And something that I appreciate about Justin, I know this is kind of off topic, it's totally off topic, but whatever, is Justin, like,
I'll allow it.
Justin you never put me down in public. Like I can kind of, be mean sometimes, or like tell a funny story that turns out to be less funny
that
to you.
turns out to be mean.
But you never put me down, and that's something I'm trying to grow in, and I've gotten better right over the years.
You haven't said anything on this episode just yet.
Thank you.
At least nothing that I haven't cut.
Excuse me. But like I think that that's such a beautiful thing in a marriage to have that safety and that mutual respect and mutual love. And it's not that I don't respect you or love you. It's just I genuinely think things are funny when they're really not. So navigating life's changes is something that Aaron and Rose talked about. And it's so crazy because we've been friends with them for a little bit and have had some really good heart-to-heart conversations with them. And there are things that I did not know, like her name. I didn't know her name came from the Titanic, like from a group of high schoolers. Like that's incredible. But I love that about this podcast, right? That we get to learn some crazy cool things about our friends.
It is true.
So she went from some of the poorest places in Vietnam to LA in the pandemic to Florida, and Aaron did his own journey. And I love what they said about always coming down to gratefulness. And we almost considered changing the title of this episode to gratefulness,
gratitude,
because they kept going back to that and kept saying like, and of course they had the comparison, right, of people who literally had nothing. Nothing, like a hole in the ground to cook their food with a fire in it. So they literally not compared, but like saw what they had through that lens, which I think sometimes in America we don't have that perspective. But I love that every season of their life they thrive in and they embrace the change because they're always coming at it from a view of gratefulness.
Yeah, I think with, like you said, embracing that change, navigating that change, there's that balance of how do you be intentionally flexible, almost, for lack of a better term, of how do you plan for things not going according to plan. And again, I think about that and we talked about this quite a bit, like Aaron and Rose being in film and, us being in that as well.
Yeah.
Like that's a good analogy that we can kind of compare it to because, man, stuff changes constantly in that world. Sometimes because of maybe planning that wasn't as well thought out as it could be. Other times, things that are completely out of your control, that in life. But again, knowing like it's very helpful to go in with a plan.
Yeah.
Especially kind of like zooming out for a section and going back. And again, this is just one of those threads of overlap from episode to episode. Like, what am I here to accomplish? What is my goal? And again, that's true of, in filmmaking, be like, all right, what are we trying to say in the scene? What are we trying to communicate? What are we, what's the big idea that we're trying to get across? But I think that's true in life as well, as like, as different things are hitting you in life, within your control, out of your control, whatever it may be, knowing like, okay, what is our mission in this season? Like, again, for us, this week has been, this week and last week has been a rough one. And it's like, we've had to have a few talks of kind of stepping back and being like, okay, what are your goals for today?
Yeah.
What are we
Goals
trying
for
to,
this hour.
what are we trying to accomplish? What is our mission? And that is, obviously it could be like, what is your goal or mission for this next hour? Or it could be life in general in this season with strikes going on and sickness and all kinds of things. Like, all right, what am I here to accomplish?
Yeah.
And again, going back to success, what is my definition of success that I see? And once you can hone in a little bit more on what that is, again, master mission mate, what is my mission? Then that's how you can pursue something. Then you can intentionally move toward that. You can try to intentionally thrive.
Absolutely.
In what that goal is. And then, the circumstances surrounding that, whether that be sickness or kids having, meltdowns or, other people's kids, obviously never our kids. Oh geez, I think there was a meltdown right before we were recording this episode. But yeah, like the circumstantial pieces, you're able to be more flexible with that. You're able to kind of embrace those changes and navigate those changes when you know what your mission is, what you're going for, as well as, like you said, that contentment factor. And I think Aaron and Rose beautifully embodied that piece. So yeah, we're very thankful to have them on. And I thought it was just incredible. Rose, sharing the story. And I mean, what a cool perspective that she got from doing this. Going and recording these stories from the different families in the mountains of Vietnam and seeing like how they lived and the fact that they were content with that, man, you can, like you said, I think we are very privileged in America that we have that. And again,
are we?
Yes.
They probably have better health than we do. They have more joy. No, I'm just kidding.
I don't.
But yeah, no, perspective certainly feels very different in America than it does in some of those other countries.
I mean, we're very thankful to, very blessed and privileged and thankful to live in America. It's making sure that, again, we have that balance of not being consumed with stuff, because there is opportunity for a lot of stuff in America. I mean, how amazing is that? But that can also become a distraction.
Okay, Dave and Barb.
Do you want to do this, or do you want me to?
I want to.
Are we gonna have to fight about it?
Oh no!
No, go ahead.
Okay.
I'm kidding.
The Art of Fighting Fair. What an honor it was to have Dave and Barb on our show. Like, you guys don't even understand. Dave and Barb have been like our role models.
They're cool kids.
Over the years, and we're just so thankful to have them in our lives. And of course, their kids are our close friends, and will be on the podcast soon as well. But they did such a beautiful job of not just speaking about fighting and that couples fight and that people fight, but actually giving us practical advice and then being real. Like, that's what I love about Dave and Barb, is they don't try to hide who they are or what they go through or times they've gone through, but that their marriage is so genuine and so real. and they had to fight for that, right? Not
Yeah.
just each other, but the external things too. Like I feel like when when there is no fighting in a marriage, and I don't even mean like loud arguing. I mean the quiet ones. Like I don't think that, you know, having disagreements is unhealthy, you know, or working
No, I
through
feel
things.
I feel like there's when two human beings
Hmm.
are in close proximity and intimacy over the period of time, there is going to be conflict.
Yeah. And that conflict can be internal. And sometimes
Mm.
that's the hardest conflict is when it's two people that can't voice it or can't express it, and they just have to,
They
you
just
know,
sit in it.
they just sit in it until it's over. And that's still, in my opinion, them working through it and them ultimately fighting for their marriage to continue. And when
Yeah.
you stop having the fights internally or externally, that's when a marriage dies, and that's
Mhm.
when there is no hope. And I feel like, you know, there's hope when there is that 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 desire to hang on and to continue.
Well, I think the desire to communicate, and
Yeah,
sometimes communication is messy.
it is.
But I think that they had a really good practical application of, one thing that they say is like when they feel like an argument is heating up, that they'll stop, they'll like hold hands
Mhm,
and they'll
touch.
pray.
Mhm.
And even if you're someone who doesn't pray, I mean, I think taking time to just like almost meditate for a minute,
Yeah.
or something where
Breathe.
you just kind of try to remove yourself from the intensity of that
Situation.
moment.
Mhm.
Like for us, we tried that, and
Very
it was actually
helpful.
like a combination of like the meditation and the prayer, where like Stephanie actually had the really great wisdom and foresight, where I think
No.
both of us were like to a point of frustration where it wasn't just like we could start praying
Mm-mm.
right in that moment. And so we
Mhm.
just kind of sat there in silence
Yeah.
for, I mean, it was probably like at least a minute, if
Yeah.
not more. And during that time, it was really cool. And you could kind of just sit and process for a minute
Mhm.
and know that the other person is doing the same, and
Mhm.
really think through your words, think through the words that maybe you had wanted to say,
Right.
that as they're then
Yeah.
you're sitting with them, you're like, that actually probably is not
Yeah.
helpful. And again, it helps you step back and be like, okay, what am I actually trying to
Yeah.
accomplish
Oh, I
in
think that's
this
great. Because
situation?
I think that is something that's actually beneficial of an argument, a fight, a disagreement, whatever you want to call it. Is it is productive, right? Like it should be. A good, healthy fight should be productive. There should be an outcome to it. Something should be rising to the surface. Communication should be done, and it actually shortens whatever that discomfort is, or it gets you to a place where you can voice what's going on. Like that should be the goal. And I just, there might be someone out there that needs to hear this, that conflict is not conflict can be a healthy thing.
Yeah,
Conflict can be a good thing. Just because you're having conflict in a relationship does not equal a bad relationship.
yeah,
Conflict without resolution, conflict without love, conflict without genuine caring about
yeah.
each other, that's a problem. But to have conflict does not equal unhealthy, a bad thing.
Yeah, and even defining conflict, because
Mhm.
again, I think
Sure.
oftentimes when people hear conflict, they, like you said, it's the raised voices screaming at
Mhm.
each other, fight, slam the door, whatever it
Ooh,
may
yeah.
be. And
Mhm.
it's like, no, conflict is, I think there's always the potential for a conflict, and even defining conflict is like a voicing of a frustration.
Yeah.
Because, for many people, I think that is a conflict in and of itself, for the
Mhm.
person to be like, should I communicate this thing? Should I
Right.
say how I'm feeling?
Yep.
Um, and a lot of people don't. A lot
Uh-huh.
of people don't,
They
in the name of like keeping the peace or being a
Mhm.
peacemaker or whatever it may
Right.
be.
Or
They
not
don't,
wanting to make it
or
worse.
not wanting to make it like
Ugh.
they don't communicate a frustration or how they're feeling
Yeah.
again, and there's a healthy way to do that. There's,
Exactly.
Dave and Barb talked about this, the importance of timing,
Mhm.
or even like going to the person and being like, hey, you're probably not
gonna
gonna love
this.
this,
But
but
can we discuss
but can we
something?
talk about something?
And I struggle with guilt about a lot of things. I would say 95% of our arguments I don't feel guilty about. Like, I don't feel guilty about having them. I don't feel
Mm,
guilty about communicating about them. I don't feel guilty admitting we have them because we work through them.
mhm,
We have a healthy way of, we're not leaving them where we're angry at each other
right.
or we're bitter or we're have unresolved. Do things come back up? Absolutely. Like,
Yeah.
but I think that there's just so much joy in the fact that we accomplish something together through working together,
Yeah.
even through an argument or disagreement.
Yep. The importance is communicating with
Mm,
each other and working through that
yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Our last, but definitely not
Episode
least.
17.
Yeah, take it away.
Yeah, Eric and Annie Worrell, about
Lovely.
living generously, which is, it's funny that this episode came out with a dead. I mean,
It
again, we are
is.
very, obviously try to be intentional with the episodes and
What?
everything like that, but just actually how it played out and came out is our church is having like a generosity.
Above and beyond
Yeah,
week.
yeah, yeah.
It's amazing. Like, we get to
Yeah,
hear about all the testimonies from the last year's Above and Beyond about how, the money is being spread, and not just the money, but the time, the
the
volunteer
volunteers,
hours,
yeah.
all these things how that really adds up. And if your nonprofit or whatever you would choose to give to doesn't have some kind of report,
An
of
impact statement or
yeah,
impact
it's
report, or
like, look into it,
yeah, understanding like
Mhm.
where and how that
The money.
money is being used.
Mhm.
There's an old, again, a staying proverb from the Bible that says like, where your, you know money is, or where your treasure is, your heart is going to be in that place
Mhm.
as well. And so really it's just saying you spend money on what you prioritize, on
Mhm.
what's important to you, is where that money goes.
That's right.
And that's why I'm very thankful, honestly, to have, like what Eric is for Annie. Like, they balance each other out very well. I am very thankful for Stephanie. I mean,
Mm.
I think we try to balance each other out
We
pretty
try.
well.
Yeah.
It's a process that we
Right.
are trying to be intentional about to
And I
thrive
struggle
in,
with
but
it. I mean, generosity is not something that comes naturally to me. I like having money in our savings account and in our bank account and in our
and again,
retirement.
there's nothing wrong with that. And
No,
we're
there
not
isn't.
by any means trying to say don't do that. Like,
Yeah.
have your emergency fund,
Right.
be smart with your money, be wise about your
Right.
retirement, and
But the joy that comes from holding loosely, and I love that Annie gave the pickleball
oh,
analogy,
that's right.
and
Yeah.
then texted me after we ended and was like, "Was that dumb?" No, Annie, it was wonderful because, yes, you have to have a loose grip, for God to truly utilize it, or for there to be that joy, or there to be that it does give you a rush to see someone else succeed, even in a small way. And not to toot my own horn, but like, a single mom came up to us and had our kids, and they were like, "Oh, what did you do for parenting?" Stranger, just a waitress, and I was able to tell her about our process and say, like, this is just what worked for us. And she's like, "Can you write down that book? That sounds amazing." So I was able to write down the book, and then I had cash, which I never have. And because Litia gave it back to me, that's right, because I was giving her money for something else, and she's like, "You gave me too much." Anyway, but I was able to take that money and give it to the single mom to go buy a book that I highly recommend, or whatever she needs. I don't care what she used it for. But like, that was just such a joy and such a small thing. But that just multiplies the more that you can look at money as a way of blessing others, as being kind to others, as giving to others. Um, and not being something that you have to hold on too tightly to.
Yeah.
So, and you can still be freaking successful, And there are bad ways to be generous, to just have it for the tax write-offs, to
Mhm.
just have it for the way that certain people use it to give away. But hey,
Sure.
you need it all. Um there's a lot of disasters happening over in Maui, which and
Yeah.
you just see hundreds and hundreds of people and families being absolutely devastated by um
With the
the
fires.
fires, and
Yeah.
their houses are gone, and they can't get water, and they can't get food, and they can't get towels. And I have a friend that lives over there, and they've been posting about it, and they said that most of their relief has come from GoFundMe pages
Really.
and personal, like Venmo. Like, they're not getting government aid as quickly as they need, and so
Yeah.
these GoFundMe pages and Venmo just sending them money and letting them like have the um um direct access to then utilize it as they need is sometimes the best way to give.
Interesting.
And I think that that's pretty cool. Like, you don't have to just have money going into some kind of big nonprofit, tax write off. It can be, there are so many ways to give, and just find what makes your heart and your partner or your family's heart have joy in giving, and find that area to give in.
Yeah.
I thought this was really good, like how to model it for your children. I
Yeah.
think that that's really important, and Annie got to see that firsthand with her parents and how they were generous not only with other people, which is something I think is so important. They were generous with their own children,
Mhm.
and not in like a spoiled way, and not in like you get whatever you want, but in a way that was very kind. When they got married, they got a kind gift. Things like that go a long way, and I think sometimes it's easier to give outwardly than inwardly. And so I think that was really cool that she got to see her parents model generosity towards others, but also
Mhm.
got to experience that generosity, and now they get to do that for their kids. and
Yeah.
and they are such generous parents, and we talked about this, not just financial, it's also time, it's also energy, it's
Yeah.
also
What they say,
gifts.
like generosity is like an attitude as
Hmm.
well. And
Yes,
again, I think that's why the uh, title of the episode is living generously, is because it is a lifestyle.
it is.
It is an attitude. And I think the Jones talked about it within hospitality, and so many people have talked
Hmm.
about it, like how that just permeates into every corner and aspect of your life, and living generously with loving on people with your time and your resources and your energy and your skills or whatever it may be. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, the importance of living generously.